Okay, everybody, welcome. So my name is LiZhen, and I am one of the 3 facilitators for today's training. And it's our practice to start with a few moments of silence together. So we'll start there, and I just invite you to settle into your space, wherever you are, however you are at the moment. And you're also invited to either close your eyes or take them off the screen for a moment. Yeah. And we'll go ahead and take 3 breaths together, after which I will ring a bell. Welcome. Gemma?
Good morning, you beautiful faces. It's wonderful to see everyone coming in. I'm going to give it just a minute so that all the folks coming in, we have a long tab. Over 100 is what I heard this time this morning to be here. And LiZhen, thank you so much for that grounding. To apparently, Sarah, I'm not sure how to turn that off. Yeah, so it'll be okay. Take a moment to acknowledge, the places that and the places that you have been a part of and currently. So my anatomy, my is an organ in what is known as the Kalapuya people. And as I said, mononymy, and my husband as Western, sing the songs of the people of the West and the people and places that we have known and loved, and also honor those places that are the places that you have known and loved and are part of. With this prayer and the Ohlone people, which is founded within. Dhammayapa, four directions, Eshin Zani and Anawa. Thank you for our relatives. Thank you for our ancestors who sacrificed so much for the land so have today, so that we can breathe the air that we breathe today, so that we could be aligned. Thank you for their history that they have shared with us in our bones and our DNA in this time. Thank you for the descendants of the Kalapuli people and the Ohlone people and all of our ancestors, all of those ancestors that of the places that we have traveled and that we have loved and that we currently reside in. We thank you for blessing those waters and that land, for protecting their descendants in this time, for their nations and their peoples, and for all leaders of all nations. We thank you for putting that blessing and being sacred. I need Hoya ni hey, ni hoya ni hey. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Found great value in placing people right into relational practices. So we want to put everyone in a breakout group, and we find that this allows people to connect with at least one or two other people and just bring what we can all be more present here. So the suggestion, once you're in the breakout room, is to say hello, introduce yourselves, and then allocate time. It might be 2 or 3 people, so the allocation of time. And the prompt is to tell me about a time when you felt joy and pain at the same time. So tell me about a time when you felt joy and pain at the same time. And another suggestion is after the person speaks, those who are listening can say, I heard, and follow that with one word of something that resonated with them, or a phrase, and then you switch people. So I think we'll go ahead and put you all into breakout groups now. And LiZhen, once everyone's in a breakout group, I'll admit these last 3 people and we can.
Sounds good.
Okay. Everyone joining us now. We just sent people off into breakout groups. I'm going to do the same with you all, and it's just a moment to tell me about a time when you felt an option when it comes now. well.
Recording again, and I hope everyone enjoyed their time getting to know one or two other people, or if you were in the big small group, a lot of us. And we thought it'd be helpful for those of us who are facilitating to take a minute or so to each introduce ourselves to you so you can get to know how we come by this work. And my name is LiZhen Wang. I'm currently on Huichin, which is unceded Ohlone territory here in California. But my people are from a small series of fishing islands called Penghu, and also from China. And we are Buddhist and Taoist by hundreds of years of lineage. And I am an astrologer by trade. And my most recent work is really focusing on how to understand that this is actually a true moment of abolition of the systems as we know it, but using the planets as our guides to understand how we can make that happen. So that's a bit about me. And I'll pass it to Gemma to introduce yourself.
Thanks, LiZhen. So as I shared before, my name is Gemma Benton. I'm Menominee and Filipino. I am an Air Force brat. I am admiring LiZhen's knowledge of how far back the Buddhist tradition goes in her family. For my family, there was a lot of fragmentation. And so I am an Air Force brat. I have traveled around from place to place and am part of many communities. I am a grandmother, a mother of 2 grown children, and grandmother of 5 of my own biological children. And then with my husband, we have 13 grandchildren and 5, sorry, there was the last one, 5 great-grandchildren together. And so we are essentially retired, but we love doing activism, and I do some workshops around ancestral healing on myself. So yeah, I'll say that much. So thank you for all being here. And so I will pass it to Ocean.
Hello, my name is Ocean. I go by he, him, and I'm a Chilean Cuban American. And at the moment, I live in a Buddhist intentional community in downtown Berkeley. It's called the Mangalam Center. And for about the past 2 years, we've been working to transform our community from its traditional form into more democratic government style, inclusive space. And so I have strong interest in the intersection of mindfulness and social change, as well as group dynamics. And I came in touch with the Yet to Be Named network a few years ago, just through friends talking about it, really. So that's a little about me.
Thanks, Ocean and Gemma. So we're here today because we really want to mobilize with folks around the November elections. And this training is one way to prepare together for that. I will say briefly that as an astrologer, it's really in my heart that this moment is much bigger than November. We are in a moment, I believe, and I see in the stars that we humans are trying to change the way we live together on this planet. And this moment we're in right now is a really critical one for that, but also a process that began before now and will continue to be important no matter who's elected in November. And at the same time, this is an opportunity for us to practice together some of the values that we want to organize a next world around. So that's what we're here for, and we'll share some other offerings that are available if you want to keep mobilizing together. But in the meantime, we really want to center around what are some of the values that bring us together to organize in a way that's healing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and give me one moment to do that, please. Okay. And I wanted to acknowledge that this fierce vulnerability training is, and all the mobilizing I've been talking about, is happening under the umbrella of the Yet to Be Named network, which I think several people might know about. And if not, we'll talk about a little bit about that later. And this training is around fierce vulnerability. Well, what is that? This is a condensed training, but it was a weekend training. But I can share that for me personally. Fierce vulnerability means showing up with a soft front and a strong back. And what I mean by that is, to give you a personal example, I've spent this past year doing a lot of healing with my father. My father is someone who hurt me as a young person. And when I was an adult, I became more awake to the ways in which I had experienced trauma. And the way I dealt with that was I needed to really shut him out. I needed to hold a really tight boundary where there was a lot of space between me and him. And anytime I had to spend time with him and his patterns came up and some of his rage manifested, I had to hold my boundary by being really silent and not engaging with him. Then fast forward to 2020 and all of the conditions of this year, and I found myself having to live with him for several months this year. And the same thing would happen. His patterns would come up, my walls would come up, he'd escalate, I'd escalate my silence, and we wouldn't talk to each other. And it just wasn't working. We couldn't live together that way. But I knew that I still needed to hold my boundary, that this behavior that he exhibited, which I won't get into the details of, is really unacceptable to me, that I can't live that way, having an enemy at my house. And so for me, that's the strong back. If I need to be really firm in what my values are, but I had to really soften my front so I could actually engage with him. So finally I sat him down and I was like, I just want to share with you how what you're doing is affecting me. And I hope you can hear me. I would love to let you know how I'm feeling. And I love to hear from you what's going on for you that this is happening. My friend Katie Long calls this compassionate confrontation. I confronted him, but with compassion. And it's really, honestly, a surprise to me how much has changed. I'm changing a lot, which is, I think, helping him to change. And so I feel like I have a sense of what this means on an interpersonal level, but what does this look like on a collective level? This idea of compassionate confrontation or a fierce vulnerability. Well, here's one image of that. This is from a protest in Johannesburg, a student protest from 2016. This looks to me like compassionate confrontation. There's also this image. This is some Thai monks who, as a way to take direct action against deforestation, realized that they could ordain trees as monks. So here are some monks ordaining trees to prevent them from being cut down. And just looking at this image of direct action, to me, invites softness. It reminds me of what's sacred. Like, what a different way to do direct action, Fierce vulnerability to me on the collective level is about acknowledging the need for direct action and to resist harm, but to do it in a way that's healing the harm and not perpetuating harm. So that's what we want to offer in this training is some of the frameworks we use, some of the values we share, and how we want to take action together. Yeah? So to ground and to begin, one of the frameworks we use is a tool called zones. And this might be familiar to some folks, but if we think about the comfort zone, you might know this very well. It's where we typically find ourselves. The comfort zones where we're doing things that we already know how to do, that feel comfortable, familiar. Your emotions are probably regulated. Very little growth is happening here though, because we know what we're doing already. We're doing what we already know. If we move a little bit outside of the comfort zone, we move into the stretch zone. Excuse the misspelling of stretch in here. But the stretch zone is when we move outside of what we do know and we're learning something we don't yet know. And you might feel comfortable here too, but you also might feel challenged or pushed. Either way, we've stretched ourselves beyond what we know and we're trying to learn something new. But in the stretch zone, our emotions are regulated enough that we can still take in information and another perspective. So what happens when I stretch so far that I'm a little bit beyond this zone? Here we're calling it the panic zone. It's got jagged edges. And the panic zone is when I'm so stretched that I start to not be able to really listen. Maybe I'm triggered by something someone has said. Maybe my survival instincts are starting to come in. You know, one way that I recognize panic zone is when the dialogue in my head starts to get thinking extremes. Like every time I bring up this thing, my dad starts to yell. And I say every time, which actually probably isn't true. That's an extreme thinking of that story. Or I might think these people are evil. That's also an extremified version of the feeling. So when I start to go into extremes, I know it's panic zone operating. I'm not actually able to take in the full information of the moment. I've gone into a story about the moment instead. And not that anything is wrong with any of these zones, but just awareness of them helps us get attuned to what's happening for us in the present moment. Where are we in situations that we either do know a lot about or maybe don't know a lot about that are hard for us? Where in our zones do we go? So I want to offer a little contemplation for us to reflect on how we are in our zones. Where in our zones do we go in different scenarios? And what I'll do is I'll offer a few prompts, a few scenarios that folks can reflect on, okay? There's a little bit of tech instruction for this, so I'm going to walk you through the tech instructions. So if you're looking at your screen, you might see that at the top of your screen, it says like LiZhen is sharing their screen, right? And next to it is view options. So if you click on view options, you'll get this series of options and you want to select annotate right now. When you select annotate, you get a whole other set of options. And if you click stamp right here, you see these options and you can pick a symbol that will represent you for the next couple of minutes. And we're going to use these stamps to indicate on this spectrum where we land in different scenarios. Is that clear for folks? Okay, so we'll take a couple of seconds for people to get their annotate symbol all nice and ready. Yeah, and you could even play with it for a few moments. I see people trying it out. Go ahead and try it out. Just practice making stamps on the page. Beautiful. Awesome. Okay, and please pause. Thank you. Because now we're going to get into some real life scenarios, okay? So I'm going to clear the screen. Excuse me. Try to clear the screen. Okay. So we're going to get started with a couple of prompts, and you just want to respond with where you land on the zones. And don't think too much about it. Just really feel it with your body and go with your gut, okay? First prompt. Where in your zone do you go when you're talking to someone with radically different politics than yourself? So gut reaction. Nice. I see some huge range of responses, some real honest panic zones, some stretch zone, a little bit of comfort zone. Okay. Now I'm going to clear this. We're going to wash away that prompt and we're going to do a new prompt. Where do you go when you're talking to someone with radically different politics, but it was the you of 10 years ago? Where did you go? So I see a lot more panic zone and like far off the end of panic zone than the last question. So probably some changes and growth in the past 10 years. Okay, we're going to clear that and go to the next prompt. So now if you think about getting arrested or tear gassed at a protest, where in your zones do you go? Yeah. Definitely a more extreme example here with some real consequences. So I see that there's, again, a spectrum of responses. For some people, this is the comfort zone. For a lot of us, it's stretch or panic. Okay. How about if you are sharing something really vulnerable in front of a group of people? Where does that put you? So a much wider range. We might be a group of people who are a little bit more comfortable getting vulnerable. Maybe the vulnerability side of fierce vulnerability comes a little bit more easily to this group. But again, a spectrum, right? A whole spectrum. Okay, I'm going to clear the screen. And where in your zones do you go thinking about the upcoming election or the election cycle that we're in right now? Where does that put you? Yeah. So a lot of stuff in between stretch and panic, a little bit of comfort. It's so real. Sometimes we might be in stretch and then go into panic and then go back into stretch, right? It's not also just one experience. Okay, I'll clear that away. And we'll do one last one, okay, y'all? Where in your zones do you typically go when you're thinking about climate catastrophe? Yeah, I really feel this one too. So I see a lot more stuff weighed on the end close to panic. All right, I'm gonna clear the screen for now. And in a little bit, we'll talk about how do we navigate our zones? Like how do we stay regulated? But for the moment, just like these scenarios showed, I want us to contemplate some about how these zones from comfort to panic happen for us individually, but also on a collective systemic level, we have these zones. So in the network, actually, I need to clear the screen one more time of stamps. Okay. So at the Yet to Be Named network, we operate under the belief that change is fractal. Oh, folks, if you don't mind, let's pause on the stamping so I can stop clearing them. Thank you so much. Okay, so at the network, we believe that change is fractal, but first of all, what is a fractal? A fractal is, it's a shape, a curve or geometric figure where every part of that shape also looks like the whole shape, meaning the same pattern repeats itself from the smallest bit to the largest piece of it, the whole. And we see these a lot in nature, like a fern is a fractal. So is the delicious Romanesco broccoli, one of my favorite vegetables, maybe yours too. And a lot of succulent plants are also fractals. So there's a lot of this in nature. It's in every building block of our world. For example, just the way that a cell is made up of protons circling the nucleus, so is a hurricane circling the eye of the storm. So is our Earth rotating around its own center. So as the Earth orbits around the sun, along with the other planets in the solar system. And actually, one of my favorite things as an astrologer is that our solar system is actually also moving. The sun is also rotating around the center of the galaxy. And so just as everything orbits and circles, all of life as we know on this planet is governed by the same laws of gravity and physics. And we believe in the network that these cycles of change also apply to us humans at every scale. That the same cycles that govern the small to the large are also what we see happening with trauma and healing. So we see patterns of trauma and healing reflected from personal to systemic levels. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just take one of us as an individual. All of us have some core traumas, most likely from childhood. And just to take an example, a family member of mine, he has some core traumas that are yet unhealed, like many of us, some unhealed core traumas, and it keeps manifesting all these different ways. And I'll support him on different issues that come up for him, but it's like, it happens in, his partnership, in his work life, in his parenting style. He has these traumas that come up around money. And there are all these different issues that I've supported him on, but sometimes they keep repeating themselves even after we resolved, quote unquote, resolved some of the issues. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. You hit one, it gets better, and then the next issue pops up. And then you deal with that one, and then the next issue pops up. Something keeps popping off. And what I often see is that when the same issue keeps resurfacing itself, like for instance, with this family member of mine, he keeps having conflict in his partnership, that recurring issue actually looks a lot like his core traumas. That he has a core trauma around his parents' conflict that he saw growing up that keeps reflecting itself in his partnership. And if we only try to address all of these surface issues, I mean, quote unquote, surface issues in his life without addressing the core traumas, the same stuff repeats itself. We have to get to the root if we want to treat the symptoms. We can't only treat the symptoms. And, you know, I think most of us know this about individual healing work, right? But if we take this to an expanded example, a collective example of, let's just say, X nonprofit. I've worked at a lot of nonprofits in my life. It's actually very similar to what we find. That an organization also has core traumas. It also picked up some habits in its childhood. Let's say in the founding of the organization, there was some internalized racism, some internalized patriarchy, or let's say founder syndrome. And it plays out in all these ways, like around communications, turnover, volunteer retention, leadership transitions. You know, I worked for a labor union for a few years, and there was a real sense of internalized classism at the labor union. We had a lot of working members who were security officers. But what was so hard for me about that job was that I didn't feel like we actually respected the thinking of our members. And instead, we had all these paid staff organizers who were the decision makers. And so this internalized classism kept playing itself out and causing issues around the communications, leadership transitions, volunteer retention. And because we didn't work on that core trauma that was at the founding of the labor union, we couldn't really effectively actually deal with the issues that were showing up. And so what I found in that nonprofit or that labor union was that we were constantly in a collective panic zone. We're constantly having to deal with conflicts that came up, and we couldn't ever really rest because we weren't addressing the root issues. If we expand this example out even further, we could see how this happens with something like a nation state. It too has core traumas, right? Like there are also traumas that were present in its childhood, aka in its inception. Like in this country's been founded on the stealing of indigenous land, on genocide, on enslavement, and these injustices are at the root of the nation's founding. They are part of the nation's childhood trauma. But it shows up in all these symptoms, right? Or like these core traumas keep showing up in all these places, like around imprisonment, around education, around displacement, gentrification. And we're always trying to deal with these issues like healthcare and gentrification. But if we aren't getting to the root core traumas, then we can't really heal them. I mean, how many of these issues does racism show up? I would say every single one. And if we aren't dealing with these core traumas like racism, capitalism, and more, we can't ever fully heal these other issues that are surrounding the nation. We have to get to the core. That's what we would like to do in this work. That's what we hope to do. So a little bit more about this, but I'm going to pause for now because that was a lot of things, and we'll take a moment to just integrate. Okay. Osha, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, I thought we would ring some tinctures so you can, just to mark the transition and just take a moment. So you can just listen or take a breath with this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, do you all see that? Can I just get a thumbs up to see if people see that? Good, okay. So, thank you, LiZhen. And like LiZhen was mentioning, core trauma triggers or activates our panic zones. So, like this image from the movie Inside Out, when we touch our core trauma, it can put us into panic zones. So we have some brain imagery here, high advanced brain imagery. So when we're in our panic zone, the part of the brain that's responsible for creativity, logical thinking, understanding consequences, and holding complexity gets disabled. And as you see in the photo here, that's the higher cortex. So the higher cortex gets disabled. And some people call that the amygdala hijacking. The amygdala is this little thing right here. And they call it that because the amygdala is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing emotions, memories, and motivation. And so it kind of takes over and puts us into this fight or flight mode. So we're going to take a look at how that shows up. You have fight or flight, or the survival instincts. Strong emotions triggered pretty quickly. Our ability to hold complexity and nuance go out the window. And we lose creativity and long-term strategic thinking when we're in this panic zone. And just to go with the fractal theory, on a social scale, fight or flight, you can witness when you have armed protesters on both sides. Neither side is willing to dialogue, and it's just looking for a fight. And I'm not saying this happens with everyone, but just to kind of paint the picture of how it manifests on a social scale. For the strong emotions, you may see screaming matches on the streets. I went to Alameda Beach the other day, and I encountered 2 screaming matches in the short time I was there. And so this is happening more regularly. For a little ability to hold complexity, we see and feel the polarization of the state of the world right now. Everyone's either Nazi or a communist in the US, I guess I should say. And little in between. And then with creativity, I've been having trouble tapping into creativity myself, and maybe you have too, and with the state of how things are. And the thing about creativity is that it's not just about painting or writing or singing. Creativity is also about inquiry and curiosity and not having a fixed position. And so you can feel this collectively, how creativity is lessened. So what we're saying here is that the world is experiencing a collective trauma. We are in a collective panic zone. And some of the activators are here on the screen. You see the wildfires, COVID, climate catastrophe, racial injustice, erosion of democracy. And if the world is in panic, and we respond to that from a place of panic, we're just adding more panic to the world. For example, on a more individual scale, if I call my friend Amira, and I'm like, hey, I'm really having a lot of trouble. My community is kind of in a lot of conflict, and I'm activated, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Amira says, sure. Let's go on a walk and let's chat about it. So we're going to go meet up at Ohlone Park, and on the way there, something happens to Amira, and she gets very activated and kind of thrown into the panic zone. And so we finally meet up, and I'm here in the panic zone wanting to talk to Amira about things. And so I'd start telling Amira what's going on. I'm like, hey, so this happened and that happened. And Amira's just not really able to hold this complex situation because she's also in the panic zone. I don't feel heard. She doesn't feel heard. And we end up just with more angst amongst ourselves. And we leave our little gathering in more disarray. And so that's on an individual scale, and you can imagine from a larger scale. And so if we want to bring healing to this collective trauma or our panic zone as a collective, we need to do it from a grounded place, which is very hard to do in these times in 2020. And so that's why we're going to talk a little bit about emotional regulation. This is a link here that we'll also have in the chat of some emotional regulation tools that might be helpful for you, and you can take a look at them on the East Point website. But one thing I want to mention about emotional regulation is that if you're in the panic zone, and of course I think a lot of us know this, I'm just saying it again. If we're in the panic zone and we decide to use an emotional regulation tool, like let's say a yoga posture that's really regulating for us, that's great, and it might help us come down from the panic zone and really be in a good place. And so it's very helpful to do these one-off. But we're recommending that you have a regular emotional regulation practice, because the more regular your practice is, the more that we can stretch our stretch zones, and also the more readily we can come back from a panic zone. So we're going to do a little practice. Yeah. So if you just want to get comfortable in your seat, you can start standing as well. And just start by shaking your hands, shake your hands out and your arms. And you can feel free to turn off your video if you're feeling a little shy. It's okay. So shake your arms and shake your head a little bit. You can let your tongue just go crazy in there. And just shake it out. And now, as we come to stillness, put your hands on your lap and just notice any tingling or vibrations that you might feel from the transition of movement to stillness. And just feel into that sensation. You might feel some tingling in the arms, the head. And just follow that sensation to the movement of the body breathing. The rise and fall of the belly. The air in the back of the throat. Expanding of your back. And just really allow interest in all of the little movements that happen while the breathing happens. And you might still feel the tingling in the arms as the belly rises. And there's nothing that you have to do for the breathing to happen. Okay. So that's a relatively short moment to be doing this practice, but sometimes that's enough to move us a little bit closer to the stretch zone. And I think a practice like this you can do at home and extend the time. But I bring up this practice because I think it's beneficial in a direct action. If you're at a march and you start to get a little activated, you start seeing more energy than you're comfortable with, you can just shake out your arm. It doesn't have to look like sitting in a meditation posture or like doing these yoga poses. Like, just shake your arm out and just see if you can follow that sensation from your arm and just kind of start coming back to your body. And it's just like another layer of what's happening. There's thinking that's happening, and there's also the sensation of this arm that you just shook out. And you can follow that into the sensations of the breathing. So I hope that's something you might take with you. And then also this emotional regulation link here. There's some other practices, and there are many. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about delusions. I love this image, cutting through the delusions. So being able to see through the delusions and see truth is a fierce practice. I'm going to make a statement, a delusional statement. So from this state of maybe your emotionally regulated state, just see how you react to this. So everyone has an equal opportunity here in the United States. So that is a delusional statement that is believed by some people. So can we see some, you can type a reaction in the chat if you have a reaction to that. I'm not sure if I can see the chat, but. I'm sorry, yeah, I'm not able to see the chat, but
Ocean, some of the things are like BS, ha,
yes.
sarcastic laughter.
I was hoping for that reaction. Thank you, LiZhen. So this is a quote by Wolfgang. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free. So as long as we're living with these delusions that we don't question and we don't challenge and explore and break down, then we'll never be free. So these are some individual delusions that you may have come in contact with, and you may be working with. I'm not enough. I wouldn't fit in there. I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm not capable of doing that. And I'll always be alone. And here, for some contrast, there's systemic delusions. You have gender binary, race. We live in a democracy, and money has value. So any other systemic delusions that people want to bring up in the chat? And again, I think I'll lean a little on LiZhen or Gemma to maybe read anything that's coming up.
Carol brought up, as a white woman, this doesn't touch my core trauma, though I know it to be untrue, and it now enrages me and brings me great grief to hear it. So the idea that racism and all of these things don't touch our core traumas. Is that right, Carol?
Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, there's a bunch of really great shares in the chat, like that productivity determines our personal worth, or that education makes people better.
Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, individualism. That's a big one.
That is.
That separation.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing those. It's good. So we're going to share a few here, some key delusions that the Yet to Be Named Network focuses on. So the climate is not in crisis. The climate crisis has nothing to do with race. Things aren't that bad. We don't need to do direct actions to confront systems. And maybe some of you are familiar with this. This is fine. Things aren't that bad. I like this image. And another one, and one of the key ones here is individual liberation. So within the Yet to Be Named Network, we do not believe that anyone is free until all life is free. And that includes the lives that we may not like so much. So all life needs to be free. And the last one here is something that's very important for our moment here. Is that another delusion is that a coup is not possible in the US. So we put this here because we want to recognize the seriousness of this possibility and what's happening in our electoral world. So we're going to take a moment to do a poll. What is your experience with direct action? Nice. Okay. See some answers. A lot of I've done a fuse. Most I done a fuse. Some direct action is my jam. I see a direct what? Okay. So I think the majority here is I've done a few. So that's good. It's good to hear like where you're at, wherever you're coming at this from is good. So I'm going to end the poll here. Maybe I'll just leave it on for another moment. Okay.
Ocean, there's a request if you could share the results of the poll on your screen. Some people can't see it. Is it not?
Sure. Can people see it now?
Oh, I think maybe not. Do you want to share it one more time with folks?
Yeah, I see it.
We can see it. We can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I can see it.
Thank you. Thank you. I love how responsive the group is. So these are the results. As you can see, I've done a few takes the lead by very little. I'm going to stop sharing them now and go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to go into what direct action is not and what direct action is. So what direct action is not is only about getting arrested in civil disobedience. That's certainly a part, a component of it, but it is not only that. Another thing that it is not, although these are very important things, is get out the vote, lobbying, and petitions. And that's because what direct action is, what we're defining it as here, is confrontational and truth-telling, taking collective action to change something, and this is the one that speaks to the get out the vote and stuff, is It's outside of sanctioned ways to make change. Outside of sanctioned ways to make change. So the state allows us to do certain things, and they would prefer that we take these actions. And so direct action is saying, we're going to take direct action. We're not going to go through what you've allowed us to do. Another quote by Michael Nagler is, in a world of lies, the truth is inherently confrontational. And I'm going to go a little quick because I see I'm going over time. So direct action for the yet to be named network is stopping immediate active harm, disrupting complacency and normalization of violence, and creating power for healing and accountability. And here's the last slide here. It's an escalation of violence slide. And when there's escalation of violence, the nonviolent response has to escalate as well. So for example, if you need a crosswalk light in your neighborhood, you might sign a petition to get that moving. Now, if there's a fight happening, you might have to get in the way and like, hey, you really need to take some space. And in response to police brutality, people shut down highways and really get loud. And so often when we escalate our tactics of nonviolence to meet the heat of the violence, what also happens is an escalation of polarization, division, and separation, which are the things that are hurting us as well. So how do we escalate tactics and double down on healing? So now I'm going to pass this over to Gemma.
Thank you, Ocean. That escalation of violence piece, it's such a powerful piece. It really, light bulbs go off in my mind. There's so much to integrate with all of that. So again, I'm going to just invite all of us to take a deep breath. I'm going to share my chime here. I'll hold it up so that you can see it. Love the way that sounds and allows us to go deeper. So I'm going to take a moment to just share my screen here with all of you. Can you see that okay? So let's talk about shame and accountability. So we've talked about fractals, and we've talked about emotional regulation in all of this. And this is an important part of the work that we're doing around shame and accountability. As much as we'd like for it to be different, sometimes even in our nonviolent communities, we use shame to force people to change. There is no way we can reach healing as we continue to do that. The idea that we can shame someone into transformation or accountability is yet another one of those delusions that we have to begin seeing past. Once someone feels shame or is in that shame cycle, the truth is they may not ever speak about it until they feel safe. And I guess I would say even more so until they feel that someone really cares about how they feel. If we're going to have accountability, it's going to be because we feel, because we allow other people to feel with us, and we care about how they feel. Growing up, I knew 3 things to be true: that survival was everything, that life was about surviving and preparing for the next onslaught, and that in order to survive, I had to do everything better than the next person. So for me, that was a mantle that was passed on from my ancestors that I carried. So I showed up earlier, I worked later, I worked harder. I did what other people was not able to do or not willing to do. And in some ways that was hugely helpful for me. It got me into some places, it got me to do some things that I wanted to do. And for those I'm grateful for. But there's some places where it hurt, it cost me. And that was especially around my children. So I have 2 grown children, as I mentioned. I have 5 now biological grandchildren. And 60 years ago, when my oldest grandson was being born, and my daughter was pregnant with him, she decided she wanted to have this elaborate meal and have us all together before she had the baby. And so she worked so hard to pull the family together. Despite all of our differences, she got everyone there. She made a meal that was amazing. Everything by scratch, handmade decorations. It was beautiful. So as we were enjoying this beautiful meal, all of us sitting together for the first time in a long time, I heard some snickering to the left of me. And I looked over there to the left only to see my daughter passed out on her plate. Now for everyone else, they could laugh and they could say, well, she was pregnant and she's exhausted. But for me as her mother, there was some real deep pain around knowing that what I had done was taught my daughter to push herself to this place of exhaustion. And what I realized in that moment was this was a way that I was taught to internalize the violence. That I was taught that I was not enough. That there was nothing that I could do that was ever enough. So this was internalized oppression, internalized shame. And I was seeing it there with my daughter. So imagine my pain a month later when she went into early labor, and they said it was because of exhaustion. And we nursed my grandson through 3 months of ICU. And the truth, as much as that might be like unnecessary guilt that I carry in some ways, it was a powerful opening. It was a breaking of my heart so that I could open up the relationship to these conversations with my daughter and to talk about how we pass the wounds on through the generations, through the way that we react or the way we respond to ourselves and to each other and with each other. So as we were taking care of, her newborn son, her premature son, we got to learn about connection. And I got to really see that life wasn't about survival, it was about connection. As we had that skin-to-skin contact with that baby, that little tiny life, no bigger than a squirrel, baby squirrel in our hands, that we got to learn together and heal that story about survival, that what we had was this moment. If something should happen, God bless him, he got strong, but if something should happen to this infant, this little tiny life, that we had this moment to share and that we were healing it together. So when we talk about our shame, it allows us to begin to heal it together. When we talk about the difference between shame and guilt, shame is where we internalize it and we talk about it personally, that I am bad, and it separates me, it disconnects me from you. It disconnects me from my own self, from my own body. We call that the shame body. So that we can't feel, we're not embodied, right? Our truth is not embodied. We're disconnected from ourselves, from the earth, and really all that gives us life. With guilt, on the other hand, inspires us to action. We know that we can respond differently. Guilt is about the we, that we recognize that we own our part in causing the harm, that we initiated in some way, are responsible for the harm, and that we begin to feel safe enough to make changes with each other. So it is a point of growth in relationship. When we look at our history, our shared history here, especially in North America, and we look at the layers and layers of unresolved trauma, genocide, violence, rape, murder, racism, slavery. How do we begin to heal these things together? How do we begin to develop a healthy guilt about our part in all of it? And how do we hold a space for people to release their shame so they can get to a healthier sense of guilt and begin to feel true remorse? And how do we do this as the violence is escalating? Within the East Point piece, the yet to be named network, this is the conversation that we're having. How do we be fiercely vulnerable in these spaces? How do we bring more of ourselves with and for each other? How do we hold space so that people can transform themselves? We can transform, like if we think of our stories as each a fractal in the larger story, how can we transform our stories together? Literally, I'll share another quick story with you. When I was working in the Central Valley of California with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, I saw the truth of the way that these fractals happen in the earth and the way that unresolved trauma in the earth is stored and then gets expressed out. So I saw a woman, in a burial site where that unresolved trauma of her rape and the violence, her death, was echoed out in the actions of the construction crew and the tribal archaeologists in our team. That violence and that hate being tossed around back and forth, like Ocean was saying, that violence being echoed in the parks, that we're experiencing on all kinds of levels. So when we show up, each of us as a fractal, as a cell of healing into these places, how can we begin to transform them? This quote from Kazu is so beautiful. To me, it really speaks to the heart of nonviolence. It's not about what not to do. It's about what we are going to do about the violence and the injustice we see in our own hearts, our own homes, our neighborhoods at large. It's about taking a proactive stand, against violence and injustice. Nonviolence is about action, not inaction. It's about action with compassion. It's about creating these subtle shifts of awareness within ourselves, within each of us, within that tiny fractal of being, so that collectively we can create these powerful insights that lead to remorse and fierce vulnerability. comes holding people accountable, holding people in love, and in a place of empowerment, so that they can begin to make changes inside of their lives. They can choose differently, they can respond differently, so that their minds and their hearts are expanded to create new solutions with each other, so that we're no longer replaying the same history over and over and over again. So I want to invite you in this moment to join me in a sacred healing at this moment. And taking, just like in this picture, that new seed of possibility, and in your cupped hands, holding all the shame that you have felt, not being enough, never measuring up, feeling as though your life did not matter, feeling as though maybe none of it mattered, feeling as though every effort that we made was not enough. And breathing with that shame, silently or in a whisper, speaking to it, I see you. I love you. I want to understand you. In this moment, in this sacred now, I place you in the hands of the sacred to be held in trust and healing. And so it is. So, everyone take a deep breath, and we are going to do a little exercise to kind of move off that shame that we have held so well within this circle. So thank you so much for holding that and listening and so fiercely being vulnerable. And we're going to do an exercise called Pass the Stretch. So one of the things that I've learned about, working with trauma is that, our muscles, our cells hold those energies. And just like Ocean had us shake that off earlier, we're going to pass that stretch and shake it off. So I invite you, I'm going to do this first stretch to kind of move your neck around and even your jaw. So your jaw and your neck, holding that tension. And when you yawn, when you lean back and stretch your neck and kind of yawn, that yawn releases all those positive oxytocin connecting, chemicals to your brain. It allows you to be flooded, with that feeling of love and safety and support. Again, that's another one of those emotional regulation pieces. So moving your neck around, yawning, and I'm going to pass the stretch to Joni. Would you be willing to do that, Joni?
Sure.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you.
We're going to stretch our arms very wide. Lift the chest. Look away from the screen. Take a big breath and give yourself a huge hug, really feeling the connection of your hands on your shoulders, all that phone banking and hard work and writing letters and postcards and everything we've all been doing. Let's pat ourselves on the sides of our arms and say, good for us, yay. It all makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll pass it on to Donna Bransford.
Hi, Joni. I totally knew that stretch was coming to me. It's good to see you. Hi, friends. Can I just say, Gemma, thank you so much for your amazing, amazing sharing and modeling of fierce vulnerability. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to try to do a heart opening stretch. Let's see. Maybe we can. What should we do for a heart opening stretch? Everyone, put your hands here on your. What are these called? Ribs, and try to breathe really, really big to make your ribs bigger. And feel going that way, and feel going that way. To have a little bit more space in here for big breaths and for big open hearts. I'm gonna pass. Can I pass to somebody else?
Actually, if we could just stop there, because we could be passing all day. It's so much fun. Thank you so much, Donna. Yeah, thank you. It's beautiful. That's a good one. So thank you all for that, and for all that you do. You know, just like Joni was talking about, you know, you do so much, and you are so much part of the transformation out there. I'm going to pass this to LiZhen to talk to us about how we strengthen that network.
Ah, so beautiful. Thank you, Gemma. Okay, how do we strengthen the network? Well, we presume that all of you who are here with us today are interested, like us, in forming a way of being in direct action that is healing, that makes space for all these feelings that we've talked about. And we are folks who are trying to organize that way. So I'll share a little bit about the yet to be named network. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. And so this is a network. You might have seen this zine that the network has. It's a little bit outdated, but everything up to the first 32 pages is still true. And it's an emerging, yet to be named, network of direct action teams that want to work at the intersection of racial healing and climate justice. And some of what we shared with you all today is the way that we want to be doing that healing work. And in ourselves, but also making sure that that work we're doing in ourselves is amplifying into how we're being in the world together and healing the collective harms. So, you know, the network is actually a national being. Let me see if this will help. The network is a national being, and as I mentioned, our focus is really on the intersection of climate and healing racism. And it's a decentralized model where there's a lot of small teams. What we want is to get people into teams of trust and teams that are centered in relationship so that we are together, not just one person among thousands when we go to actions. So that's why we really emphasize the team aspect of this. And we're hoping that things like today and some of the other offerings we have coming up will help us find each other if we don't already have a team. And you don't have to do the team within the network, by the way. That's not the point. We're not trying to like recruit everybody. We're just sharing, here's how we're doing it. And we find it really helpful to be in relationship to do this work. So we're offering that to you. And you could do that with us in the network or not. But some of our upcoming offerings as well, from now until October 24th, it's trainings like this one, as well as other ones on how to do direct action, how to do an art build. And so you can go to the East Point website to see more trainings. And then from the 25th to the 3rd, we'll be doing 10 days of actions and events called Deepening Together with a different theme every day. So there's going to be a day of grief, a day of joy, a day of ancestors and honoring the land. And why these themes? Because we feel that actually getting in touch with this wide spectrum of our emotions, as well as being in ritual, are the ways that we can heal harm. That recovering these parts of ourselves will help us recover our true nature collectively. And then on election day and onwards is the phase that we call taking action together. So a lot of this is still information depending on what happens on November 3rd. But as your astrologer, I can tell you that November 3rd is a day when the Mercury retrograde stations, which you don't need to know astrology, but it means it's even more intense than normal Mercury retrograde. And it happened in 2000. So we know that there may be some chaos of information. Anyway, astrology aside, we are working with some frameworks of how to take action together. One I can share is called Taking Action Together from a group called Choose Democracy. And this is their 4-step approach to how to basically not allow a coup to take over. So people can do this 2-hour training. It's available at the website that's right here, choosedemocracy.us. Maybe someone could put that in the chat for me, because I'm going to go to the next screen slide. And as the Yet to Be Named network, what we're doing is we're trying to take action together. If a coup is announced, or if, you know, something like that, it happens in the Bay Area, we are coordinating artists and activists together to form teams to take action on the 3rd, where we would block multiple intersections while artists paint the word democracy as a huge street mural. And it will look something like this. This image here is from 2019. And the real emphasis to us is, again, getting into those teams. We want to be doing our work together, because we know that when we are together, we're safer, we're stronger, and we're more able to respond. Being in a team for us as the network is about basically committing to being in action spaces together, both before and after the election. Knowing who you'll be with, having some commitment to each other, gives us some of that foundation for safety and mutual care. We need mutual care in this world. So that's why teams. You can get more guidance on how we recommend teams form at the website. Let me see if I can put this in the chat. Ocean, thank you. Okay. Yeah, and then if you do form teams and you want to coordinate with us, then we recommend that you fill out the survey at the second website that said November teams, and then you can coordinate with us for that. Yeah, so what I want to do is give us a chance to actually feel into what it might be like to do some of this. I'm going to stop my screen share for now. What would it be like to be on a team? What would it be like to form a team with some people that you know and you trust, or maybe some people that you're meeting through something like this, where you know that we have some shared values and shared frameworks for how to be together? What would it be like to move out of isolation and be together and even go to an action? Oh, I see that there's been a request to share a little bit about the 10 days of action, and we can share more about that in the QA. Thanks, Ocean. But the 10 days of action are really a practice point for us to really be in some of these tools together to prepare for what could be a larger action on the 3rd. So that's why I want to say the thing that we're really moving towards is the 3rd. So to contemplate that together, I want to invite us to get into our bodies. And I'll describe a little bit what we're going to do. We're going to designate somewhere in your personal space, wherever you are right now, we'll designate 2 spots, okay? And one location will represent what it's like to be at home during this time. And maybe, you know, whoever we live with at home, if it's by ourselves or with roommates or with family. And then another location, not too far away, but still in your space, will designate to mean what it's like to gather in a team for action, okay? You can either do that in physical space, where we'll move our bodies from one location to the next, or you could do it on on a piece of paper. You could just move your hand from one location to the next. Does that make sense? So here's the first location. I can move my hand to the next location when you're prompted. I'll give some guidance for that. And we'll use this spatial location to imagine, like a guided meditation, what it's like to do this. So I'm going to ask folks to take a moment to find space in your space. You might decide to stay where you are too. But I recommend finding 2 locations, whether on a piece of paper, on your hand, or on the floor. Okay, so I see some folks are settling into your space. Go ahead and do that. Again, the 2 spaces don't need to be very far apart. This is going to be just a short embodiment. Okay. So wherever you find yourself, just really take a moment to be where you are, whether you're standing, whether you're seated, whether you're laying down. And imagine for yourself that it's tomorrow and you're at home and you're wondering what's going to happen in our world in the next couple of weeks. Maybe the windows and the doors are closed if the AQI is not so good. Maybe your windows are open if it is good. Maybe you'd be, scrolling through the news on your computer or scrolling through Facebook. So in your body, you can begin to move how you might be if you were at home doing this. Are you typing? Are you on the phone? Are you texting? Are you eating a meal? But imagine yourself in your space. You're doing what you do when you're at home. Maybe you're having some feelings about the election coming up. Now we're getting closer to election. Imagine it's October 31st. You're at home doing your thing. Now from the place that you are, begin to move your body and start to move yourself from your first location towards your next location. And in this motion, we are trying to imagine gathering people to be in a team with us. So imagine for yourself who are maybe 3 people that you trust, that you would want to be on a safety team with, on an action team with. And find your body reaching for them. You could actually take your hand and reach, extend a hand of invitation. Invite and reach the people that you would want to be on a team with and start moving closer to them. You can start walking through your space, heading towards your second direction now. Notice how it feels to invite these people to you. Notice how your body wants to reach for them. Yeah, and notice yourself finding this person. Okay? See how that feels in you. Now get to your next location with them. Walk together or move your finger together to that second location. And in this second location that you are now in, you're with your team and you're with hundreds of other people who are also in their team of people they trust and love. And here we're doing, let's say it's the big action. There's artists painting a street mural, there's music, and there's also other teams of people who are blocking intersections. But we're doing this in coordinated teams. So imagine yourself doing that. Maybe you're painting, imagine yourself linking arms with people, but put your body in whatever motion that would be in. And just try it out on your body. How does it feel to be linking arms? How does it feel to be painting? How does it feel to be surrounded by the music? Notice what comes up for you. Take another beat there with yourself. See what comes up. Okay, now begin to drop that action from your body. The action is now coming to a close. Let it go. And if you have moved, now move yourself back to your first location. Move yourself back home where you live, wherever it is that you find residence right now. Take your time and notice how that feels to come back home after having been in the action. See if there's any kind of physical motion you want to do for yourself here back home. Okay. And then welcome you back to our shared training space right now. So doing that together just to see what might come up for you about what it's like to be in a team, to take action together. And I want to invite for a few moments anyone to share in the chat anything that came up for you, or if you would like, we could take one or two people vocally. Yes, COVID. Yeah. I wanted to mention that in that guidance, imagine we're taking safety precautions around COVID. So that might look different for different people, whether you're with your pod or whether you're with people who are not in your pod and you want to be spatially distanced. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that because I forgot. Yeah. So seeing a few different things are coming up for people. Mm-hmm. Really good questions. And so these are some of the things that we might, that might inspire us to get on teams. And these are some of the questions that we might need to address in order to feel safe getting on a team. Okay, so I'm gonna pause that there because we have just a little bit more. We want to make space to do some Q&A with folks. But I'll just say real quickly, because I saw a question in the chat. Someone asked, is the big action on the 3rd or the 4th? Yes, you're right. I meant to say the 4th. I hope that's clarifying. Okay, I'm gonna pass it to Ocean now.
This is really just a time for Q&A. I know there were some questions in the chat before, and I don't know the answers to all these, but I'm maybe between the three of us or all of us, we can answer some of these. So I'm going to go back to these questions. Can you share more about the 10 days of action? From Arye? Is that right?
Yes, hi. I know that there have been, oh, so sorry.
No, please.
Oh, I know that there is in the works, at least in Oakland, there's a plan forming around having 10 consecutive days of action, each with a different theme.
Mm-hmm.
And just wondering if that has been confirmed or what's the status of that plan?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, there are 10 days before the election where we're going to have days of deepening is what they've started calling it. And so LiZhen was mentioning like day of grief, day of mortality, day of youth. And so there are those 10 days. Whether or not, I don't know if either of you know if that's on the website, if that information, or if it's not up yet.
I'm not sure. I think it may be up.
Okay. Well, what we do know is that there will be 10 days and people have organized so people are ready to facilitate those days. And something will be up on the website about them or as an email soon-ish. I think Kazu requested like a description by today, so it should be coming. Okay, any other questions? I see a lot of location questions, like who's by Berkeley, who's by Sacramento, and I've seen this come up before, and it's like, how do we connect people? Yeah, I'm not sure if the Yet to Be Named Network has some sort of area where people can get together and like see names. And so I'm looking to you all again, if you know if Yet to Be Named Network has a way for people to connect aside from at these sessions.
I could share briefly that because we are a decentralized network, right? There's no like centralized top. We're really working locally, and you know, Ocean and I are based in the Bay Area, the East Bay, actually, and I believe that in the next couple of weeks there will be at least one more COVID-safe outdoor in the park gathering of people who are interested in being in the network to meet each other. I did one yesterday I attended one yesterday afternoon. Other than that, I will offer myself, if like you are wanting to see if you can get in touch, I might be able to be a mini hub for a little bit, so I can share my email at the end.
I had a question about something you had said, Ocean. You said if you have a team together that you should sign up on the page for like that you're one of the teams organizing around this. Is that only for local people? Like I'm in Minnesota and we have our team out here. Is there any benefit of us joining that network, or should we just do our own thing?
What I was mentioning earlier is I was actually wondering if there's a place where people are listed saying like, hey, I'm in Berkeley, so that you could pair up with people, but I haven't seen anything like that. And for what you're saying, is there any benefit in you kind of joining the network to be a part of that? I would say yes, because there's communication among teams, and it's kind of a growing network. And so things like this will be happening that you'll be informed of with your team, might be a helpful resource. And then as things kind of permeate, then there might be more groups in your area, and the action can be more populated. So I think yes. Here we have, where on the website will the info be shared? If maybe someone can pop the eastpointpeace.org into the chat, it will be shared on that website. And there's a huge button that says November Actions right in the front, and you can just click on there. More about East Point Peace Academy. East Point Peace Academy has a lot of different things they do. They do nonviolent communication or Kingian nonviolence in prisons. They do different workshops around Kingian nonviolence. And one of the things they do is Yet to Be Named Network, or they are a part of the Yet to Be Named Network. So East Point Peace Academy, yeah, I guess I don't have a short way of saying what they do. I've just been to a lot of their workshops and stuff. If LiZhen or Gemma, if you want to say something.
Yeah, I would add that East Point does a lot of restorative justice work. So there's also a lot of work that East Point has done in prisons and within the criminal justice system to do restorative justice. Obviously, that can't happen right now because of COVID, and prisons are shut down indefinitely, but that's also part of the work. And a lot of its work right now is to support in this Yet to Be Named network and to participate in it and be a hub for it. I also want to add just a brief piece, Ocean. I just had the thought that I could create a contact list for those of us who are in this training. And if you're trying to link up with people or want some help finding people in that area, you could fill out that form, that Google spreadsheet. And that might be easier than trying to contact me, for example. So I'm going to share that link. I'm going to ask that people please do not share this link beyond who's here today for safety reasons. So if we can know that this link will only stay within those of us here, it can be a contact list. And it's a voluntary contact list. If you want to put yourself on it, you can put yourself on it, okay? So I'm going to do that here.
Thank you.
I also put the email in there for East Point Peace Academy, info@eastpointpeace.org, so that any of you can, email the office to, and then we can take those and begin to compile them. But I think that, to me, as I'm sitting with all of this and the Yet to Be Named network and all of that, I think that part of what we are doing between all of this is developing a culture around resiliency, a culture and a network with language and practices. And that's the value of the teams. Whether we actually all meet up in a specific place is almost besides the point, right? It is important, but just developing these cells, again, going back to that example of those fractals, right, that are consciously meeting around some of these ideas, that are developing language, that are developing resiliency, That's really, really key. And then we're flexible to respond to, and we're engaged with whatever might happen next, whatever in our world needs responding to. So I think that's the value of developing teams, whether or not you're in the Bay Area or not. It's beginning to develop community around these ideas and a culture for it. So to me, that's what comes to mind there.
Mhm. So
May I ask a question?
please.
So in my community here in San Francisco, I'm the only one that either has the time or the interest to actually like go to these workshops, and I've done several things. And so my community and my family, they're like politically aligned with me for the most part. So it's not like it's diverse in that sense. We're kind of like-minded. And I just want to know, like, I don't know, I guess I feel a little bit afraid of taking on like this responsibility, but I feel like, do you feel like it would be okay for me to make a team of my contacts, like, so that like I'm a spokesperson, or do you think I need to be with a team with people who have done these workshops? You know what I mean? Like there's like a difference, and it seems to me we want to yeah. And I just want to hear what you would have to say about that.
So I'll start. I think there's room for both of those directions that you can take. You can organize the people that you know, and you can start there, and that has its pros because you're comfortable and you can start with that foundation. You're comfortable with each other, maybe not so comfortable with the experiences. I'm assuming a little bit here. And then in the other direction, you'll have the comfort. And perhaps if you link up with someone in the community, and you'll just have to build the comfort of relational practices, which there are a lot of exercises and ways and resources for that. So I think for me, it sounds like you can go in either direction, and it would be an experiment either way.
The combination would be the best, because then it wouldn't be all on me.
That's true. Is there anything that anyone wants to add to that? I think that was a good question.
You could encourage people in your closer group to check out this workshop and get some of the same ideas. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. We have 1 more minute left allocated to questions, and I see a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm like, but as far as, I'll just answer this next one. Are these actions happening in the Bay Area? The 10 days of deepening are scheduled to be in person in the Bay Area, COVID safe. There's an option for them to be virtual if it's too smoky out, in which case it'll be for everyone. And again, like the form that LiZhen is going to share around seeing who's where, you can start your own direct action with suggestions from, you'll have the resource of suggestions from some of the things that we're doing here. Yeah, I want to move on to the rest of our things here just to keep it timely, but I'll try to answer some of the questions in the chat if I can. Off to you, Gemma, I believe. Yep.
Awesome, thanks, Ocean. So again, this has been remarkable. Just all of us coming together around these ideas. I think, Tamara and I were sharing in the beginning about the pain and joy that in this time of huge change, and in some places, very painful. We have a lot of loss in our Native communities. We have loss of our elders throughout the world, people are most vulnerable. we're feeling that pain. We're feeling, the pain of the fires. We're feeling all of the confusion and chaos. And at the same time, we are coming together and we're talking about things that people have never gathered around to talk about. There are beautiful and powerful things happening with each other. And I know in my own life, personally, so that we're coming together is powerful. The beauty of this whole entire movement is that we are growing something here, and we need your support, your engagement to do that. One of the things that East Point does that's different than any place else that I've seen is they don't charge for these courses. They don't charge. They offer these webinars, webinars that people on kinky and nonviolence, webinars are other people are charging significant money for. The East Point Peace Academy has chosen to operate off of a gifting economics, a gifting economy, and they chose that for specific reasons, specifically because it's so in line with this culture that we're trying to create of generosity and kindness, of heart-centered, transformative relationships that you all have experienced today. I think if we can put in the chat, we'd love for you, if you are able to donate and to support us in some way, we'd love for that. If you're not able to, we understand that as well. And we would love for you to support us by volunteering, engaging, sharing, helping us get the word out, being involved. So we are looking at the relationship, the long term. How do we begin to make a difference in one another's lives? So unlike the market economy that encourages autonomy, I can't say that word this morning, and self-reliance, this gifting and economics is so wonderful because it allows us that opportunity to exchange, not only exchange of monetary things, but exchanging energy, exchanging value, exchanging, literally in that fractal way that we are healing one another through this exchange. So I guess I want to say that about that much, but I, really love the way that East Point is doing this. All of their information about, they're fully transparent with their budgets and economics there, so you can look at their spreadsheets and see that information there. And there's some videos on the website that eastpointpeace.org gift economics that I found super helpful. Let's see, where's my chat now? I'll post it in there later, but super helpful as far as understanding the power of the ideas that causes sharing through his network here. And this is just one of them. So I'm so grateful to be a part of it. And I guess as we move into the closing here, I want to thank, Ocean and LiZhen for this amazing time together. It's been wonderful sharing with you and each and every one of you. Loving the comments and all that we're learning here together. So with that, we're going to add the evaluation form. We would love your feedback here. I am not finding my chat icon here. So
I posted it on the chat.
Awesome, thanks, Ocean. So we would love for you to, give us your feedback. What worked, what didn't work? What would you like to see as included if we did this again? And what would you like to see for the East Point Peace Academy in the future? How can we support what your vision there? And then, not sure what these, we have that action training slide, those action training slides that might be helpful too. So I want to invite us all to take a deep breath. And again, just joining in that mindfulness and that consciousness. Thank you for all that you are and being on this planet at this particular time. So I want to offer a prayer and a song in closing, thanking our ancestors inside of each of us, thanking the descendants, all of us, and all the descendants on the land, the planet, for being part of this healing, being part of the transformation that we are all creating together. Damiyapa Eshinza, Eshinza Niyananawa, thank you for all of our relatives. Thank you for life. Eshinza Yuagwa, thank you for the water. Thank you for the land. Thank you for all of those sacred things that you have placed within each of us and around us. Thank you for the way that you watch over and protect us, the way that you open our minds and our hearts in this time to the possibilities that you have already seeded in this moment for all of us. We thank you for healing the wounds of our ancestors, generations of shame that we carry inside of each of us, healing these places of trauma and pain and violence within and throughout this planet. We know that that's possible because we can see it, we can feel it for ourselves and with each other. We know that peace is possible because you've seeded that inside of each of us and in all those sacred things with and for one another. We thank you for all the ways that you continue to watch over and bless our leaders in the small movements and the large movements, asking that divine direction be had in all things. And so it is. All you need to know, all my relations. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh, hey, hi. Ah, hey, oh, hey, hi. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh, hey, hi. Ah, hey, oh, hey, hi. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Ah, hey, oh. Eshinza Wopila, thank you. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you to each of you for all that you are part of, the way that we are transforming the planet together. Eshinza. Thank you, LiZhen. Thank you, Ocean. And we're going to close this all up at this point. Thank you all for being here.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Wonderful.
Stay safe.
You too.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Please leave the Zoom open along so we can save the chat.
Thank you all.
Say, where is the recording of this going to be available?
It'll be emailed to everyone who registered for this.
Okay. Do you know about how quickly the turnaround for that will be?
I'm not quite sure, but probably in the next couple of days is my guess.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you.
There.